Okay, so have you ever had that thing happen where, like, your code's working fine, you know it's printing out all the right messages to your console, and then your tests just totally fail? Like, what's going on there? Well, we've got this blog post from keyandmeng.org, Musings of an Old Software Plumber, and it kind of tackles this exact problem. The author, Ang, he was building a command line application using the Cobra library in Go, and he just hit this wall where his tests just wouldn't play nice with the output that he was seeing. So, what's Cobra, you might be asking? It's a pretty popular library for Go for creating these like powerful command line interfaces. You know those text-based interfaces you use sometimes to interact with your computer? Think like the Git tool or even just a simple alls command. Those are examples of CLIs. And Cobra helps you to structure and manage all those commands and options for when you're building your own CLI applications. But let's get back to Ang's problem here. He wanted just a simple success message, just to print out to the console after subcommand finishes running, just to like confirm everything went smoothly. Sounds pretty simple, right?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Especially if you're, familiar with Go at all.
Yeah.
You'd naturally just reach for fmt.Println to print that message to your console. That's, pretty standard practice.
Exactly. That's exactly what Ang did. And his code looked a little something like this. Run.func cmd.Cobra.command arg string creating image file. Seems pretty straightforward. But when he ran his tests, they just came up empty. It's like the message just vanished.
Yeah. This is like a classic case of what we sometimes call output redirection in this software world. You see, when you run a program from your terminal, its output by default goes straight to that console window, which is technically what's called standard output. But when you run tests, it's a little different. The testing framework, it often captures that output, so it can check it against your expected results.
So it's not enough for the message to just show up on the screen for us humans to see. The tests need like a more direct line to that output.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where the disconnect was happening for Ang. His fmt.Println was just sending the message to the general standard output, which was fine for just running the application directly. But the test needed a way to specifically intercept that output, coming from the Cobra command.
And that's where this Cobra-specific cmd.Println comes into play, right? It's like it directs the output to a place where the testing framework can actually see it.
You got it. It's like having a designated channel just for the test suite to listen in on. So instead of this, run.func cmd.Cobra.command args string, creating image file. You switch to this, run.func cmd.Cobra.command args string, image file. It's a small change, but it had a big impact on his tests.
It really makes you think. If he had been using a language that's a bit more verbose in how it handles output, maybe that problem would have been a little more obvious from the start. Ang mentions in his post that he also uses Elixir and Python, which are languages known for, being expressive. Do you think that experience in those languages might have kind of influenced how he approached this problem in Go, which is, a language known for its minimalism?
That's a really interesting question. It's definitely possible. I mean, in more expressive languages, you might have to explicitly say how that output is handled, especially in a testing context. But in Go, the simplicity of fmt.Println can sometimes kind of hide the underlying complexity of where that output's actually going.
So Go's minimalist approach, while it can be a strength a lot of times, it could sometimes lead developers down a path where these like subtle differences in output handling, they aren't immediately obvious, especially when you're coming from a background in languages that might be more explicit about those things.
Exactly. It's a good reminder that even though a language's syntax might be simple on the surface, there's often a lot more going on under the hood. And understanding those nuances can be key to avoiding those frustrating debugging sessions, like the one that Ang experienced.
And it makes me wonder, is this something that's specific to Cobra? Or is this like a broader lesson about testing command line applications in general? Could our listener encounter similar output redirection challenges with other CLI tools or frameworks, even outside of Go?
Yeah, it's definitely a broader concept. I think anytime you're dealing with a command line application, whether it's built with Cobra or another framework, or even if you build it from scratch, you really need to be mindful of how that output's handled during testing.
Yeah.
Testing frameworks, they usually want to kind of isolate the application's output so they can verify it against the expected result. So understanding how to direct that output correctly, it's super crucial for effective testing.
It's almost like having a like a secret back channel for the test suite to talk to your application.
That's a great analogy. And just like with any communication, it's important to make sure that, both sides are speaking the same language and sending those messages through the right channels.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So Ang's experience, while it's specific to Cobra and Go, it really highlights a valuable lesson for anyone who's working with command line applications, no matter the language or framework they're using. Now, going back to Ang's comment about Go's verbosity, I'm curious to hear more of your thoughts on that. He's obviously a fan of Elixir and Python, which are known for their expressiveness. So how do you see the trade-offs between a more minimalist language like Go and something more expressive when it comes to testing?
Hmm. It's a fascinating debate, and one that comes up a lot in the programming community. Go's philosophy of minimalism. It can be both a blessing and a curse, especially when you're thinking about testing. On the one hand, the explicitness of Go, it can lead to tests that are very clear and easy to understand. You can see exactly what's being set up, what's being executed, and what's being asserted. And that can be incredibly valuable for debugging and maintaining those tests over time.
It's like having a step-by-step recipe, right? You can follow each instruction and see how it contributes to the final result.
Exactly. But on the other hand, that same explicitness can sometimes lead to tests that are a bit more verbose, with more boilerplate code just to set things up. And this can be where languages like Elixir and Python really shine. Their expressiveness often lets you achieve the same testing outcome with less code, which makes the test feel a bit more compact and elegant.
So it's like a trade-off between clarity and conciseness.
Precisely. And which approach is better really depends on your personal preferences and the size and complexity of the project and, the team's coding style.
It's like choosing between a detailed instruction manual and a quick start guide. Sometimes you need that full explanation, and sometimes you just want to get up and running quickly.
That's a great way to put it. And just like with manuals and guides, there's no one-size-fits-all answer. It's about finding the right balance for your specific needs.
And I know some developers, they swear by Go's explicitness, even in testing. They argue that the extra verbosity, it forces you to be more deliberate about what you're testing and makes it easier to catch those subtle errors.
Yeah, I completely agree. That enforced clarity can be a real asset,
Mm.
especially as your code base grows and more people start working on it. It can kind of act as a safety net, preventing you from making assumptions about how things work.
But I can also see how that conciseness of languages like Elixir or Python, it can be really appealing, especially for tasks that might feel repetitive or tedious in a more verbose language.
Absolutely. If you're writing a lot of tests that follow a similar pattern, being able to express those patterns concisely can save you a ton of time and effort. And it can make the tests themselves more readable and maintainable as long as you're careful not to sacrifice clarity just for the sake of brevity.
Right. It's all about finding that sweet spot where your tests are expressive enough to be concise, but also clear enough to be easily understood and maintained. Now, I imagine our listener might be wondering how this all applies to their own work. What are some key takeaways they can glean from Ang's experience and, this discussion about language choices and testing?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway here is to just be mindful of context when it comes to testing. Whether you're working with a minimalist language like Go or something more expressive, the key is to really understand how your tools and libraries are handling input and output, especially in like a testing environment.
Right, like how Ang's initial use of fmt.Println worked fine when he was just running the application, but then it just totally fell apart in his test suite. It's a good reminder that what works in one context might not work in another.
Exactly. And this applies beyond just output, too.
Yeah.
Think about like file system access or network requests or any other kind of interactions that your application might have with the outside world. Testing those effectively often requires a different approach than just running the code like you would in a production environment.
It's like setting up a controlled experiment, right? You need to isolate those specific variables you want to test and control for any of those external factors that could influence the results.
That's a great analogy. And just like with any experiment, careful observation and understanding the tools at your disposal is essential.
Okay, so be mindful of context and understand your tools. Any other words of wisdom for our listener, especially if they're new to Go or testing in general?
Definitely. Don't be afraid to, dive into the documentation and explore the resources that are available for your language and testing framework. There's so much information out there, from tutorials to blog posts, community forums where you can connect with other developers and learn from their experiences.
The Go community in particular is known for being very welcoming and supportive. There are tons of online communities where you can ask questions, share your code, and get feedback from, experienced gophers.
And don't underestimate the power of just reading other people's code. Look at some open source Go projects, study their testing strategies, and see how they approach common challenges. You can learn a lot from just observing how others structure their tests and how they handle edge cases and how they make sure that their code is robust and reliable.
So it's like learning by example, seeing how the pros do it in the real world.
Exactly. And remember, testing is an iterative process. It's not about writing perfect tests right from the start. It's more about building a suite of tests that kind of evolves alongside your code and helps you catch errors early and make sure that your application is behaving as you expect it to.
So embrace the journey, expect to make mistakes, and learn from those experiences.
Absolutely. Testing is a skill that develops over time with practice and experimentation. The more you test, the better you'll get at identifying potential issues and crafting those effective tests, and just building confidence in your code overall.
Well said. Aang, if you're listening, we hope this deep dive has given you some food for thought and maybe even inspired you to explore the world of Go testing even further.
And to our listener, we encourage you to keep experimenting, keep learning, and keep diving deep into this fascinating world of software development.
That's all the time we have for today's deep dive. We hope you found it insightful and maybe even a little bit entertaining.
Until next time, happy coding.